It's time to meet the 4-star quarterback recruit who's saying no to Auburn, saying no to Georgia, saying no to Texas, and is saying yes to Baylor. Let's get Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello there, Bears fans. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by Gametime, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and The Cam Show on YouTube through Rogue Media Sports Network. I appreciate you making it your first listen today and every day, and sometimes your second listen. Also looking at first and second listen, of course. Today, we are looking at Baylor's blue chip 4-star quarterback prospect who is turning down the SEC to stick with the Bears, plus VJ Edgecomb. Whew, how about that? Maybe saving Baylor's season last night with a 30-piece to beat Kansas State. And how does the basketball team take that momentum into this weekend and beyond? All that and more coming up on this episode of Locked On Baylor. Looking at football recruiting, it's a big weekend for Baylor, actually. They got Junior Day, one of, I think, 2 or 3 they do throughout the year that all these schools do. They have a Junior Day on Sunday, and one of the guys visiting is the baby of Jason Witten of sorts. You could say that Jason Witten has 2 proteges out there on Sunday, but the first would be Quinn Murphy. His quarterback at Argyle Liberty Christian, class of 26, obviously, and a top 25 quarterback prospect in that class. Composite 4-star by 247, has been highly rated ever since he was a freshman at the Regent School in Austin, transferred to Argyle Liberty Christian this past year, and won the state championship in TAPS with Jason Witten as his coach. He's been fantastic. He's been committed to Baylor for a while. In fact, before he ever took a snap for Jason Witten, he was committed to Baylor. And now there's all kinds of interest, a lot from the SEC. There's been talks of Texas and Steve Sarkisian trying to get in on the Quinn Murphy sweepstakes. And just this past week, both Auburn and Georgia have visited the facility in Argyle to come and bend the ear of Quinn Murphy. And yet Quinn Murphy says, no, I'm Baylor Bears. And in fact, not only is he going to the Junior Day with Baylor on Sunday, so not only did he say no to these SEC schools, but he's bringing a friend with him. He's bringing another blue chip recruit with him. This cornerback teammate by the name of Cooper Witten. Sound familiar here? So not only is he turning down the SEC schools, but he's bringing his friends with him to come to Baylor. Hey, trust me, come see what this place is all about. He has been big on Jake Spavital's arrival at Baylor last year. In fact, that commitment kind of coincided with that. And he's talked about that throughout the year of like, man, this is the kind of offense you want to play in as a quarterback, and look how fun they are. It certainly is. I mean, we've talked about it ad nauseum. I don't need to get into more about all the great quarterbacks that Jake Spavital has coached. You know, who's even heard of these guys? Who's even heard of Johnny Manziel, right? Or Geno Smith, or Case Keenum, or Will Greer, you know, any of those guys. Who would want to play for a guy that coaches them? And it does kind of become fascinating in terms of what we talked about a little bit the beginning of the week with the transfer portal quarterback. That's where a lot of teams are going. A lot of successful teams are going. And I'm fascinated to see, it's not a question that's going to be answered next year, maybe even the year after, but how big teams are adjusting to that and how much they develop their quarterbacks. You know, because speaking of UT, their starter next year is going to be one that they developed and they got out of high school with Arch Manning. But how often is that going to happen going forward? I'm serious. It fascinates me. Half the field of the 12-team playoff this year was transfer portal quarterbacks. But Auburn's already lost a 4-star quarterback to Baylor this year through the portal, and now they're trying to nab their their next 4-star quarterback out of high school and trying to take him from Baylor's grip. And this is, as what I was just talking about, like as much as that's kind of being diminished in a way of the high school quarterback and landing him and getting him to put your hat on and sign that NLI, as much as that's probably being diminished these days, those are still big recruiting wins for Baylor because they were wins they were not getting this time last year. They weren't getting the commitments from quarterback, especially when Georgia and Auburn come calling and tell you how great life can be in the SEC. And, in Georgia's case of like, hey, here's what it's like to play in the college football playoff. Baylor was not winning those races as close as recently as a year ago. And Quinn Murphy kind of echoes that in what he said to our pal, Will Turboff, friend of the show, Will Turboff. He said, quote, there's a lot of momentum from Baylor's 2025 signing class, and that gives me some goals on what I want to do with this next class. So kind of saw like Taz Williams at the forefront of the class of 25. That's what Quinn Murphy's trying to be in 2026. He goes on to say, I'm trying to reach out to some guys that I've been in contact with more, get them as close to Baylor as I can. This is where the high school quarterback is still vitally important to college programs because they're recruiters, they're cheerleaders, they're negotiators, they're agents. You know what I mean? If you have the prize, the crown jewel quarterback, whatever that looks like for you, that is going to have a trickle-down effect. That is going to bring other guys on board. And what's funny about this 25 recruiting class is it didn't start with the quarterbacks for Baylor, but Edward Griffin comes aboard and all of a sudden names start dropping as well. And he improves his status as a recruit in his senior year. Taz Williams kind of had this thing going from wide receiver. Taz Williams from Red Oak kind of got that momentum going in the class of 2025 and gets guys like comes in after Kamora Morgan. And then all of a sudden some more skill guys start to commit. Caleb Burns flips and he sticks with his commitment over Oregon. And it starts with one stud that you say, he committed to Baylor? Taz Williams looked like he was going to go to Michigan. Baylor wasn't even on the table when he committed and stunned the world. And you kind of heard that even from some of us, like, really? Baylor? And then the other commitments start flying in. Then your recruiting class gets really elevated. And so here's Quinn Murphy, learning from a guy who should be in the Hall of Fame, in Jason Witten. Okay, the best private school quarterback in the state, the best private school program in the state. People, our programs were just all over him from the time he was taking his first snaps as a high school quarterback. And here come two major SEC programs. I know Auburn ain't what they used to be a couple years ago, but national championship caliber program. And obviously we know Georgia is the premier program of this decade. And they come in. And he's saying, now, you know what? I kind of want to build up this Baylor 2026 recruiting class. That's real important. So no matter what the Bears have done or will do at the quarterback position in the transfer portal, remember that name. That's one to keep in your good graces here. Quinn Murphy, Jason Witten's protege. Shoot, he might even take him to the Cowboys in a couple years. Anyway, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe, of course. Locked On Baylor rolls on. They saved their season last night. We can thank VJ Edgecomb for that. We'll break down the Bears' win, much needed win, and why it almost looked like a loss. That's coming up next on Locked On Baylor. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Talkspace. Guys, therapy is a game changer, and it's something I'm actually very passionate about. It can help manage your stress. It can improve sleep. It's done both those things for me, and communicate more effectively. It's a really important thing. I think everyone should have it, if we're being totally honest. But finding the right therapist and fitting sessions into a busy schedule, we all know that can be a challenge. That's where Talkspace comes in. It's the leading virtual therapy provider. It makes getting the help you need easy, accessible, and most importantly, probably affordable. With Talkspace, signing up is simple. You can match with a licensed therapist who fits your needs, usually within 48 hours, and it's convenient as heck. You can have sessions from the comfort of your own home, like how I'm set up right now. And you can even message your therapist between appointments. Plus, Talkspace is covered by many insurance plans, and for most insured members, there's a $0 copay. It's never been easier to prioritize mental health, and if you're not, you need to. As a listener to Locked On Baylor, you'll get $80 off your first month with Talkspace when you go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnCollege and enter the promo code SPACE80. To match with a licensed therapist today, go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnCollege and enter the promo code SPACE80 and get $80 off your first month and show your support for the show. That's Talkspace.com/LockedOnCollege, promo code SPACE80. Whoa, boy. The Baylor Bears needed that win last night against Kansas State. It's the first time Scott Drew has beaten Jerome Tang. It was pretty hairy for a lot of that game. In fact, Kansas State led for 29 minutes of the 40. But the Bears get the win, 70-62. They bounce back from a dismal performance against TCU. And it's VJ Edgecomb who led the way. I mean, VJ shatters his career high, aka season high, and puts up a 30-burger against K-State last night. And it finally looked like what it would look like if the team was run through VJ Edgecomb, which I'll give them kind of the benefit of the doubt. At the beginning of the season, VJ was the best prospect and probably the best player, but you weren't necessarily saying like, hey, let's just run this thing through Edgecomb, because there was enough talent across the roster. But now, with obviously Langston Love out, Jeremy Roach out for this game, Jaden Nunn not giving you anything offensively, and something up with Norchad Omier, all of a sudden it's like, VJ, take us to the promised land here. And I don't know if it happened in practice leading up to this game or if it happened at halftime, but clearly Scott Drew or someone from that staff pulled him aside and said, VJ, we need you. Like we need you. We need the high school hoop mixtape VJ in this game. You've done a lot of good things for us this year. You've done I assume, most of the things we've been asking of you. But tonight, we need you to carry us offensively. We need you to put the rock in the hole. Okay? And that's what it's supposed to look like. Like some of you guys thought it was crazy when Fran Fraschilla was comparing him to Dwayne Wade. But like that's what you saw last night. That's how Dwayne Wade played in college and for a lot of his pro career. That's what it looked like. And that's where it kind of the light came on for me, where I was saying, like, finally, I thought I was going crazy by saying, like, every game I'm thinking to myself, there's an offense here for VJ. Like there's a style they can play that is going to absolutely adhere to VJ Edgecombe's strength, especially offensively. And if you're watching on YouTube, I promise I'm not on cocaine. My nose is just so itchy, man. It's tough. I'm sorry. But VJ puts the team on his back last night with 30. And how about a step-up game from Jalen Celestine? Like, this is a guy who, at first, the shot just wasn't going in. He was doing a lot of things right. And then you could clearly see the confidence just leave the kid. This is a 40% three-point shooter at Cal, and it just wasn't going in for him, and it translated to other parts of his game. He's dealt with injury, and they need, again, like I say with VJ, they need somebody to step up. And I was on the show yesterday afternoon talking about how it was going to be Jaden Nunn, because they needed someone to come shoot the three off the bench. Kansas State, the worst perimeter defense in the conference. You need someone who can do that. And Jaden Nunn's just been invisible. Like he's got to get hot at some point, right? Like I thought he was going to be your best 3-point shooter on this team. He did not get hot. Jalen Celestine finally did. And that's what you need from him. In a similar vein, not exactly the same game, but bear with me here. It's similar to what you had from Matthew Meyer in the national championship season. And to me, what Matthew Meyer gave you that year was like the number one kind of advantage, I guess, that they've not had since then. Obviously, there's plenty of things that they don't have from that team, from like they had in 2021. They haven't had the defense at all. This Norchad's probably the closest they've had to a Mark Feidel, but like they've had top end talent, right? Like 21 is the best team ever, obviously, but like they've had like really impressive All-American guards. They've had that. They haven't had the defense, and they haven't had that guy that could come off the bench the way Matthew Meyer could and could give you 20 on any given night, give you 20 and 8 off the bench, and could be a mismatch, like a matchup nightmare, can score inside and out and pull down 8 to 10 rebounds and guard a couple different positions. He's not that yet. He's not 21 Matthew Meyer, but it's that kind of advantage if Jalen Celestine is playing, has his head on right and is playing well and playing with confidence. And the shot's going down. Like that's what it looks like. Now, unfortunately, I think there are enough holes in this team that doesn't exactly cover it up. Because for most of this game, they looked hapless, is the word I used on the post game. Like, Kansas State is not a very good team, and they're pretty offensively challenged. And Baylor could not guard them man-to-man. Like, they couldn't do it. They were getting embarrassed. They were taken to the woodshed defensively in the first half. And, Kansas State only scores 30 points because they are that challenged, but like they were crushing them on the mismatches to the point where the broadcast was like, they can't keep playing man-to-man. They got to play zone. Like this is, they're getting eaten alive here. And they did switch to zone, and it was very impressive. They had some terrific defensive stands in that second half. Now, again, Kansas State not very good, but you got to give credit where it's due. In fact, there was one or two in that second half, and I apologize, I can't remember the exact game situation, but where they were making that comeback, and on one of those runs, I think it was the initial 10-0, 12-0 run that put them in the lead, where I was like, that's the best defensive stand they've had all season. Like they were terrific. And it's kind of that amoeba zone that Scott Drew ran for years before kind of the renaissance of this program, where they finally played good man-to-man defense. It's that hard, tight zone. And it looked really good to the point where I don't know why they weren't running it the whole game. And again, you look at the 3-point shooting numbers for Kansas State, they suck. Like, why weren't they running that the whole game? Instead, you tried to beat a man-to-man because you're like, hey, this team stinks. And it looked pretty rough for a good amount of that game. But the Bears get the win. And VJ's got some more great plays to add to the highlight reel, and now he's got the 30-piece to go with it. But I'm going to take you through one of the guys who I think something is up with, and how the Bears can use this momentum into their next two winnable games before they got some big boys coming into town next weekend. That's coming up next on Locked On Baylor. But first, this message is brought to you by Gametime, the only place I go to buy tickets, okay? Attending NFL playoff games is experienced like no other. Energy, excitement, connection with your people. It's all unmatched. I remember the thrill of seeing my Patriots in the AFC Championship game 10 years ago this week. Actually, it was one of the best games I've ever been to. This year, Gametime makes it even easier to create those unforgettable moments with their new feature, Gametime Picks. It filters out the fluff and shows you only the best deals on great seats so that you can focus on what matters. Being there. Always be there if you can be there. That's my Cam Stewart advice to you. I use Gametime Picks to grab tickets for a big hockey matchup next week, actually 2 weeks from now. Connor Bedard versus Connor McDavid in Chicago. Cannot wait. Found a super deal on Gametime. It gave me incredible value for these seats. I know which team is shooting at that end twice. I can see the view from my seats, and I know that it's the best deal. That's why I love Gametime. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's Locked On College for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. So in the game last night against Kansas State, I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but if you're telling me, Cam, was there more bad than good in that game? I'd say kinda, yeah. Yeah. Um, but I'll say this too. As opposed to what we saw in the TCU game and some of the other losses that Baylor's had this season, this was one where it really looked like, oh man, this team just needs to get healthy. And I say that because you obviously had Jeremy Roach out again. Second time he's been in the concussion protocol, so that's a worrying thing. Certainly hoping the best for him and praying for him. But you didn't have Roach, you didn't have Langston Love, and it feels like the last two games you've had a very limited Norchad Omier, to where someone in the post game comment section last night, which we're live after almost every game. It's a fun comment section, guys. Get involved in there. Someone, like, I apologize, I can't remember who, said, I think Norchad's got the flu. And honestly, I think I said that after Sunday's game against TCU. I was like, I don't think he's right. He's sick or something, because he's just not himself. And you don't usually get that from this guy 2 games in a row. You haven't seen that through much of his career, and certainly not in his time here at Baylor. And he's gotten pushed around a little bit 2 games in a row. And you can even see it when you see him in the game. He's kind of like sucking wind a little bit. So he's not all the way there. Like he's sick, flu, something, but not quite like 100% ready to go. And so that's why I was watching this game and I'm thinking, this might just be too much tonight, even against a bad team. Like, it just might be too much, which is the first time I've bought into the line of thinking of Baylor lost this game, or in this case, will lose this game because they're not healthy. And now you look at these next 2. It's only a good win. So, yes, there was probably more bad than good, and they didn't play well for a lot of this game. And you beat a mediocre team, probably a bad team, at home. So this only becomes a good win if you make it a couple in a row. I was watching Major League 2 the other night, and I go back to that famous scene of manager Lou Brown comes in, and he's basically pleading with his guys, right? And that's what we're at with Baylor basketball, where it's like, all right, you won one. Now, guess what? If you win the next one and then the next one, that's called a winning streak. Okay. Lou Brown actually says, we won yesterday. If we win today, that's 2. And if we win tomorrow, that's a winning streak. And I think Scott Drew needs to be saying that to his guys right now. Like, hey, the past is the past. Okay. You can't fix that right now. And you're not going to get this big, court storming type statement victory against a top 5 team this week. You're not going to do that. It's impossible. You're not facing them. But these 2 teams that you're facing next are either at your level or below. Utah didn't even crack 40 points last night against Houston. Okay? Like, their football team could have scored more. Baylor's football team certainly would have scored more. So, like, you need to take them out. I don't care where the game is. I don't care about the altitude. Take them out. And then Tuesday, Marriott Center, Provo, it's probably still going to be an electric atmosphere, even though they're kind of mediocre too, kind of same way you are. There we go. But again, it's like you'll be used to the altitude. You've played in tough environments before. That's why we do Gonzaga in Spokane. That's why we do Gamble Pavilion with UConn. That's why we do those things. So I don't want those built-in excuses. if you are proving us wrong, those people who are thinking this might not be a tournament team, and those who are thinking this is Scott Drew's worst team in a while, if you want to prove those people wrong, you're not doing it by having a second half comeback to beat Kansas State. That's nice. You can't skip steps. VJ has a great game. But you start to prove those people wrong if you win these next two. And then next Saturday, with some important recruits in town, you face Kansas at home. A team you've beaten at home, 4 years in a row? Am I right in saying that? 21 to present? That's when you have that opportunity to shock the nation. But these next two, you can't do that. You need to get over them first. You can't skip steps. But if you lose to Utah, this win is nothing. This win last night, nothing. Fugazi, wave to it. Bye, Charlie. Bye, Charlie. It means nothing. And if you win that game, you're not pounding your chest saying, hey, here we go, Final Four. But I keep saying it, you can't skip steps. So if you want this win last night to mean something, and that electric atmosphere at Foster Pavilion, the broadcasters were telling me it was really loud. You can't tell with ESPNU. But if you want that and those vibes to mean something, you've got to win the next two. And then we'll talk about you being back on track and being the team that we thought you were going to be. Y'all, let me know in the comments down below. Do you think Baylor needs to win these next two games? What are your predictions on these next two games? Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Be sure to like and subscribe. We're trying to work that number up. We don't want 75% of you watching to not be subscribed. We want you to help with that. And we're marching towards 4,000 subscribers. And you guys have been so great since I took over the show. So I expect you to tell your friends and get those numbers up. Thank you guys so much for making it your first listen today and every day. We will have the squad show, the Big 12 squad. Will be our afternoon show today. And then we'll, of course, have the transfer portal update tomorrow, which is going to be an interesting episode this week. Let's just say that. We've got some people to go over, some people to discuss. So thank you again for making it your first listen today and every day. We'll see you a little later on with the Big 12 squad on your favorite show, Locked on Baylor.